videotape will show you the correct operating and closing procedures for the model 480 and 481 Taylor shake machines. Throughout the tape at the bottom of the screen, you will see a colored bar. The bar will always be green while we're talking about operating procedures that take place during the day, and blue while we're covering closing and special cleaning procedures. The colored bars are to help you easily locate one of these sections of the tape again if you need to review the material. Inside the colored bars, there will sometimes be a subtitle which will describe the activities being shown. The subtitles are also listed on a printed index sheet that comes with the tape. They too will help you find a specific section of the tape for review. Also, the closing procedures covered in this tape are either explained or illustrated on a flip chart that you will use while working on closing procedures. It will remind you what has to be done and how. The procedures are important and must be followed and performed with 100% accuracy. We're videotaping the procedures for this program at Hamburger University in Oak Brook, Illinois. Over 30,000 students have attended classes and graduated from HU. There are 7 major classrooms, 8 seminar rooms, a library, and 4 fully functional equipment labs at the facility. This is the soft serve ice machine lab, and it's where we're videotaping the procedures for this program. Bob here is a McDonald's first assistant who's attending classes at HU, and he's going to help us demonstrate the procedures. Now, let's cover a few points about operations during the day. First of all, let's take a good look at the right way to draw shakes. All set, Bob?
Sure, ready to go.
Okay. You hold the cup under the dispensing spout and pull the draw handle completely forward. It's important to do this right because we want to be sure our customers are getting the best shake possible. And at the same time, we want to be sure we're meeting our own objectives for yield. A properly filled shake is when the mix is level with the cap seat. To get the proper level, push the draw handle completely up as the mix reaches just below the cap seat. Enough will still come out while you're closing the handle to do that. And be sure you cap the shake before you serve it. You should never try and draw 2 shakes from the same freezing cylinder at the same time. That pulls too much mix from the freezing cylinder and will create both poor quality and poor yield, and will cause problems with the machine as well. Another thing that can cause quality and yield problems is using the wrong air orifice. Remember, the air orifice for this machine is labeled A120. It has a round top. When everything's adjusted right and working right, a full shake should weigh 10 3/4 ounces. If you're finding shakes that aren't the right weight, or if there seems to be a problem with the mix, let your manager know. You should also tell your manager whenever it's necessary to waste a finished shake. All wasted product needs to be recorded so our accounting comes out right. If the add mix or mix out lights come on, you have to put more mix in the mix reservoir. Bring fresh mix from the walk-in cooler and add the appropriate amount of mix to the reservoir. Of course, you should always use any partial bags before opening a new one, or if your mix comes in cartons, before opening a fresh carton. If there's any remaining mix, return it to the walk-in cooler. Now, one other thing you should know about is rerun. Rerun is the mix that is removed from the machine at the close of the day. We can keep that until the next day and reuse it if it was stored in the walk-in cooler overnight. Rerun must only be used the very next day. You have to start the machine with fresh mix only and use any rerun as early in the day as possible. Rerun is kept in the shake mix rerun container. Open the container and use a sanitized stirrer to skim off any foam that's on the top and throw it away. Then, stir the rerun to break up any lumps. And then, add fresh mix to the container. The final blend should have no more than 40% rerun and no less than 60% fresh mix. Stir the mixture up well to make sure it's thoroughly blended, and then pour the mixture into the reservoir. When you're all done, Wash, rinse, and sanitize the rerun container, its lid, and stir at the back sink. Depending on where your store is located, local health department regulations may not permit the use of rerun in your store, so you should check with your manager. The instructions you've just seen are for operating the model 480 and 481 Taylor shake machines during the hours when shakes are being served. If you have any questions about these procedures, review the portion of this tape with the green color bar at the bottom of the screen. And if you feel you still need more information about how to operate the shake machine, please ask your manager for help.
You've just seen the procedures for operating the Taylor 480 and 481 shake machines. Now, I'm going to walk you through the closing procedures. The objectives at closing are to remove any unused mix from the mix reservoir and freezing cylinder and store it in the walk-in cooler, and to disassemble, wash, rinse, and sanitize the machine for the next day's opener. We'll be demonstrating the procedures on one side of the machine. During your normal closing procedures, you'll be doing both sides. For the following procedures, the control switch on the front of the machine needs to be in the off position and your hands and forearms washed thoroughly. Now, at the back sink, mix 1 packet of McDonald's sanitizer in 2.5 gallons of water and use the solution to sanitize the shake mix rerun container. And then take the container and a sanitized pail to the back of the machine. Open the mix cabinet door, remove the funnel, disconnect the mix probe, then place the ends of the suction lines in the empty sanitized pail to catch any drips. If your store has a mix probe that looks like this, remove it this way. Now take the mix reservoir out and remove the cover. Then pour the mix into the sanitized rerun container. Be sure not to get your hands in the mix when you do this. Then cover the container with a lid that says Shake Mix Rerun. Next, take the rerun container and an unsanitized pail around to the front of the machine. Then, take the front cover, drip tray, and splash shield off the machine. And also disconnect the syrup lines from the freezer door. Next, install the syrup inlet plugs. Each plug needs an O-ring and proper lubrication. These plugs prevent syrup from getting into the rerun when collecting rerun from the machine. Use the pail to drain off mix that's already mixed with syrup. That mix has to be thrown away. Push the wash button, pull the draw handles forward, and hold them until the mix is coming out white with no syrup. At that point, close the draw handles and press the control switch to beater and then to off. That cancels the wash cycle. Set that pail aside, and using the same procedures, place the shake mix rerun container under the spouts to collect the unflavored rerun. Be sure not to get your hands in the rerun you're going to save. If you run out of rerun before the wash cycle is over, stop the machine. Cover the rerun container and remove the syrup inlet plugs. And then store the rerun container in the walk-in cooler for use the next day. Remember, in some areas, health department regulations require rerun to be thrown away. Now, what you've just seen illustrates the correct way to remove rerun from the machine at closing. Rerun must be emptied from both freezing cylinders in this way. If you're not sure how to do it, now's a good time to rewind the tape and review the procedures you've just seen illustrated. Now, at the back of the machine, replace the empty sanitized pail with one that has clean, cool water in it, and put the suction lines into the water. Then, take the empty pail and at the front of the machine, raise the prime plug, push the wash button, and wait until a steady stream of water starts flowing from the bleed port. Then, pull the draw handles down so the water flushes through the machine into the pail and washes any leftover mix out of the freezing cylinder. Once the water is almost clear, close the draw handles, push the prime plug down, and stop the cycle as before. Next, replace the empty pail in the mix compartment with another pail with a 2-gallon mixture of McD all-purpose concentrate and warm water, and put the suction lines in that. The correct proportion for this mixture is 1 ounce of concentrate per 1 gallon of water. Then put another empty pail under the draw spouts, pull the prime plug up again, and press the wash button. Wait for a steady stream of cleaning solution to come out of the bleed port. When it does, close the prime plug. Remember, the wash button is on a timer, so you'll need to cancel the wash cycle again. Now, back to the mix compartment and disconnect the flare line from the mix feed tube. When you do that, you'll get some solution draining back from the freezing cylinder. Use the long 48-inch brush, run it all the way up through the mix feed tube. After you've brushed the feed tube, reconnect the flare line and go back to the front of the machine. Open the prime plug, push the wash button, and pull the draw handles down alternately until all of the rest of the cleaning solution is drawn through the system. Now, there are 2 more steps to cleaning the mix feed tube and freezing cylinder. First, mix 2.5 gallons of sanitizing solution and flush it through the system, just like we did the cleaning solution. Prime plug up, press the wash button, pull the draw handles down one at a time until all the solution is emptied out. And then flush 1 more full pail of water through the same way, alternating. Now, once you've done all these procedures for both freezing cylinders, open the side access door of the machine and turn the left and right disconnect switches off. Place the mix storage switch to off and remove the rear drip tray. Also, make sure the control switch on the front of the machine is in the off position too. Now, you need to disassemble the machine and then wash, rinse, and sanitize all the parts. First, wash in McD all-purpose concentrate. Second, rinse under running water. Third, wash in sanitizing solution. And finally, air dry all the parts. So, at the back of the machine, disconnect the flare line from the mix feed tube and remove the air mix pump by pulling out the keeper pin and sliding the collar down. Then take all the parts, including the mix probe and the rear drip tray that we removed earlier, to the back sink. Mix a solution of McD all-purpose concentrate in the first compartment and a mixture of McD sanitizer in the third compartment. It's important to always wash the plastic and rubber parts first and the stainless steel parts last. The plastic and rubber parts are the flare line and suction line, the mix inlet fitting and its O-ring, the poppet, the liquid valve body along with its 2 O-rings and 2 check bands, the O-ring off the air orifice, and finally, the piston with its O-ring and check band. The stainless steel parts include the pump cylinder, its collar and 2 keeper pins, the counterweight, the air orifice, the spring, the mix probe, the mix reservoir, its cover and funnel, and the rear drip tray. First, unscrew the flare line from the pump and pull the suction line straight off the mix inlet fitting. Pull out the keeper pin and remove the mix inlet fitting. Separate the spring and poppet and take the O-ring off the inlet fitting. Remove the liquid valve body and the piston out of the pump cylinder. Take the air orifice out of the piston and remove all the O-rings and check bands. As you can see, using a clean sanitized towel can help get the O-rings and check bands off easier. Just squeeze them on the sides and they'll bulge up enough so you can get a hold of them and slip them off. If you have a machine with a coaxial pump, there will be only one part removed from the pump cylinder, not two. Now, let's continue by washing all the plastic and rubber parts. You'll need to use the Taylor brushes that are kept in the brush storage cabinet. Inside the cabinet door, there's a diagram that shows which brush to use for cleaning each part. Okay, to wash the flare line, first brush the cleaning solution through the line, then clean the flare nuts and the area around them. Then rinse the line thoroughly and place in sanitizing solution. You'll follow the same rinsing and sanitizing procedures for all parts. The suction line is washed the same way. So is the mix inlet fitting. Make sure you get inside the fitting with the brush. Likewise with the liquid valve body and the piston. Finally, wash the poppet, O-rings, and check bands very thoroughly with the proper brushes. Once you have all the plastic and rubber parts in the sanitizing solution, you should place the remaining stainless steel parts in the wash compartment. And then take the parts tray through the same cleaning process. So you'll have it ready to put all the sanitized parts on. Remove all the plastic and rubber parts from the sanitizing solution and place on the parts tray to air dry. Make sure you keep the check bands turned right side out. That means flat side out. Next, wash the stainless parts. Use the proper brush to thoroughly wash the pump cylinder, both inside and out. Likewise the collar, the air orifice, the keeper pins, the spring, the mix probe, the rear drip tray, and the counterweight. After cleaning the counterweight, be sure to insert it back into the suction line. Remember the steps: wash, rinse, sanitize, and put all parts on the tray to air dry. Also remember, we've just demonstrated the procedures for one pump. You'll be cleaning both pumps. Finally, clean the mix reservoir, the cover, and the funnel. Next, it's back to the front of the machine, and you'll continue by disassembling the freezing cylinder. So, take the restrictor caps off the bottom of the draw spouts and lift up the slip collars to disconnect the spinner blades. Pull the spinner blades out from the bottom of the draw spouts. Pull out the pivot pin that holds the draw handles on and remove it. Remove the 4 hand screws and take the freezer door off. You disassemble the freezer door when you get to the back sink. Now take the beater assembly out, but do it very carefully. Remove the front scraper blade, then the rear scraper blade, so the blades don't fall off. If your machine is the model 481, the beater assembly has 3 blades, not 2, due to that model's larger freezing cylinders. And then, remove the drive shaft by pulling it toward you. Also, don't forget the O-rings on the syrup lines. Remember, for demonstration purposes, we're only working on one side of the machine. You'd be working on both sides during closing at your store. Now, take all the parts to the back sink, and you'll wash, rinse, and sanitize everything, just like you did with the parts from the back of the machine. As before, clean the plastic and rubber parts separately from the stainless steel parts. The plastic and rubber parts for the front of the machine are the freezer door, its bearing and door gasket, the 2 draw valves and their 6 O-rings, the 2 restrictor caps, the prime plug and its 2 O-rings, the drive shaft seal, the drip tray, and the 2 syrup inlet plugs and their O-rings. The stainless steel parts are the pivot pin, the 2 draw handles, the 4 hand screws, the 2 spinner blades, the beater assembly, the 2 scraper blades, the drive shaft, the splash shield, and the front cover. First of all, disassemble the freezer door. Remove the gasket, pull the bearing off, remove the prime plug and take off its 2 O-rings, remove the draw valves and their O-rings, then remove the seal from the drive shaft and turn it inside out, and place all these parts, along with the restrictor caps, the drip tray, the syrup line O-rings, the syrup inlet plugs and their O-rings in the wash. If the machine in your store has plastic blades, you'd also wash them now. When washing the freezer door, make sure you thoroughly brush inside and out, then rinse, and sanitize. Wash the bearing, the prime plug, the restrictor caps, and the draw valve similarly. And make sure you brush in the grooves where the O-rings go. Also wash the gasket, the seal, the syrup inlet plugs, and the O-rings themselves. And don't forget the front drip tray. Next, place all the stainless steel parts in the wash, and then clean the parts tray thoroughly. Once the parts tray has been sanitized, put all the plastic and rubber parts on it to air dry. Then wash, rinse, and sanitize the draw handles, the pivot pin, the hand screws, the spinner blades, the drive shaft, the scraper blades, and the beater assembly, and put all these parts on the parts tray to air dry. Finally, clean the splash shield and the front cover. During your normal closing procedures, when all 3 parts trays have all their respective sanitized parts on them, you store the trays on the sanitized parts cart so they're ready for the next morning. What you can't bring to the back sink, you have to clean and sanitize at the machine. Clean and sanitize inside the mix cabinet, the mix cabinet door, the door hinges and gasket, the fan guard, the syrup line fittings on the front of the machine, and the areas around the cylinders. Also, brush clean the rear shell bearing with cleaning solution and sanitizer using the black shell bearing brush. And finally, clean and sanitize the entire outside of the machine's cabinet. The cleaning procedures you've just seen have to be done every night at closing. If you're not sure how to do it, rewind the tape and view the instructions again. If you still have questions, be sure to ask your manager for help. Once a week, to break the bacterial cycle, another important health precaution, it's necessary to discard all mix in the machine and all syrup in the canisters and clean them. Since on that day, unused mix cannot be saved as rerun and unused syrup must be discarded, it's a good idea to let the reservoirs and syrup tanks run as low as possible to minimize waste. The following section of this tape will show you how to clean and sanitize the syrup system once a week. The best time to clean the syrup lines is after the freezing cylinders have been emptied and rinsed with clean, cool water, just like we do every night at closing, and before the freezer doors and freezing cylinders are disassembled. First, disconnect the syrup tanks and the syrup compartment. Be sure to disconnect the air line first, then the syrup line. Just pull up on the fittings. If you don't, you'll have syrup all over the place. Disconnecting the air line first removes air pressure from the tank. Then you can disconnect the syrup line safely. Once all 4 tanks are disconnected, take them to the back sink. There, you would empty the tanks and rinse them with water. Remember, we're demonstrating with 1 tank. You'll be doing this procedure with all 4 tanks. Remove the syrup line fitting with a wrench and remove its O-ring. Pull out the dip tube that's under the syrup line fitting and take its O-ring off. Also, remove the gasket from the syrup tank lid and then wash, rinse, and sanitize the 2 O-rings and gasket and leave them in the sanitizing solution. Then place the remaining parts in the wash and thoroughly wash, rinse, and sanitize the tank, the dip tube, the syrup line fitting, and the lid. But once you're done with these parts, put the dip tube and the syrup line fitting with their respective O-rings back on the tank and leave the lid and gasket in the sanitizing solution. Then, take a pail of cleaning solution and a small brush back to the machine with you. Put the ends of the syrup lines into the solution and then brush the connectors clean. Repeat this step 2 more times. Brush the connectors again with clean warm water and then with sanitizing solution. 1 packet of sanitizer and 2.5 gallons of lukewarm water. Now, at the back sink, fill one of the sanitized syrup tanks with hot water and bring it to the syrup compartment. Connect one of the syrup lines to it and then the corresponding air line. Remember, syrup line first, then air line, or you'll have water all over the place. Then go to the front of the machine. Reconnect the syrup lines, place a pail under the spouts, and flush about half the tank of water through the syrup line by pulling the corresponding draw handle down. You need to flush about a half tank of hot water through every syrup line. Also a half tank of McD all-purpose concentrate solution, and then flush a half tank of sanitizing solution through every syrup line. Do it just the way you did the first rinse. Connect the tank and back, syrup line first, then air line, and pull down the draw handle to let the solution run through the syrup lines and out of the spouts in the freezer door. When you're finished with the 3rd step, the sanitizer for each line, invert the tank. That will let air push any remaining sanitizer through the syrup line when the draw handle is pulled down. This procedure requires an extra pair of hands, so you'll need help from one of your fellow crew members. When all the syrup lines and tanks have been cleaned, make sure you empty all the sanitizer out of the tanks and fill the tanks with fresh syrup. Remember, we threw the old syrup away. When filling the chocolate syrup tank, shake the syrup thoroughly. Don't overfill it, just up to the fill line on the tag. Now, at the back of the machine, you install the tank again, attach the syrup line first, and then the air line. Be sure to pay attention to the color coding on the syrup lines, so you're sure you have the right flavor attached to the right tank. Now, at the front of the machine, pull down the draw handle to run a small amount of syrup into a cup to be sure all the sanitizer is out of the line, then close the draw handle. Then, you'd go ahead and finish disassembling and cleaning the machine just like you do every night at closing. This procedure is very important and must be done once a week as a health precaution. Every syrup line and tank must be cleaned. The instructions you've just seen are for cleaning and sanitizing the syrup system in the shake machine. If you're unsure of the correct procedures, rewind the tape and review this last portion. You can review this tape anytime you have questions on the correct operating or closing procedures for the model 480 or 481 Taylor shake machine. Remember, you can find the part of the tape you're looking for by watching the bar at the bottom of the screen and matching the titles in the bar to the titles listed on the printed index supplied with the tape. And if you have questions, please ask your manager for help. Operating the machine properly during the day, cleaning the shake machine every night at closing, and cleaning the syrup system once a week are very important procedures. Doing these things right helps us make sure we're serving a good-tasting, healthful product to our customers. And that's what McDonald's is all about.
This videotape will show you the correct opening and operating procedures for the model 480 and 481 Taylor shake machines. Throughout the tape, at the bottom of the screen, you will see a colored bar. The bar will always be red while we're discussing opening procedures for these machines, and green while we're talking about operating procedures that take place during the day. The colored bars are to help you easily locate one of these sections of the tape again if you need to review the material. Inside the colored bar, there will sometimes be a subtitle which will describe the activity being shown. The subtitles are also listed on a printed index sheet that comes with this tape. They too will help you find a specific section of the tape for review. Also, the opening procedures covered in this tape are either explained or illustrated on a flip chart that you will use while working on those procedures. It will remind you what has to be done and how. The procedures are important and must be followed and performed with 100% accuracy. The procedures for this program were videotaped at Hamburger University in Oak Brook, Illinois. HU has 7 major classrooms, 8 seminar rooms, a library, and 4 fully functional equipment labs. Over 30,000 students have attended classes and graduated from HU. Bob, a first assistant who was attending classes at HU, helped us demonstrate the procedures in the soft serve ice machine lab. The shake machine has to be taken apart, washed, rinsed, and sanitized, and put back together every day. It's an important health precaution, and it affects the taste of the product and the yield. So it's one more way we make sure our customers are getting the best product we can serve. Remember, there's a flip chart that shows the whole process. You should always have it with you when you're working on the machine. That way, you won't forget anything. All the parts you need to get started are located on the parts cart. At your store last night, someone took the machine apart, washed, rinsed, and sanitized all the parts, and left them in their respective parts trays to dry, so they'd be ready to go this morning. There are 3 parts trays. 2 are identical and contain all the necessary parts to assemble the front of the machine. The third tray holds all the parts needed to assemble the rear of the machine. Here, on the front of the machine, are the freezing cylinders where the shake mix is frozen and mixed to make a milkshake, and the syrup lines which supply syrup to the freezer doors. Each cylinder has some parts that go inside and a freezer door that has to be put together. Remember, since the parts in the trays are all sanitized, you have to be sure you're sanitized too. Before touching any parts, make sure you wash your hands and forearms with McDonald's antimicrobial hand wash. Now, before we start the opening procedures, we want to point out that for demonstration purposes, we'll only be assembling one freezing cylinder. At your store, during normal opening procedures, you'll be doing both. Let's get started. You'll work with the top parts tray first. All the parts for assembling the freezing cylinder on one side of the machine are here. You'll also need a tube of Petrogel. It's a lubricant that's kept in the drawer, and a clean sanitized towel for wiping excess lubricant off your hands. The first thing you do is install and lubricate the syrup line O-rings. Check them carefully to be sure they are not cut or broken. During assembly, all the black rubber parts should be checked for nicks or cuts, and if you find one that's not perfect, ask your manager for a new one. Even a tiny nick or cut on any of these parts could make the machine not work right. Next, install the drive shaft in the freezing cylinder. It fits into the hole in the back of the freezing cylinder. The narrow end of the drive shaft is the same shape as the hole at the back of the cylinder. First, this seal has to go on the shaft. Now look closely. See how it has a ridge around the outside? That's where it should be. If it's on the inside, turn the seal right side out before you install it. Before you put the seal on, lubricate the shaft with Petrogel all around the groove and up to about an inch from the end. Make sure you don't put any lubricant on the end that goes through the rear shell bearing. Then slip the seal over the shaft and push it down over the groove until you feel it snap into place. There's no front or back to the seal. It goes on either way, as long as it's right side out with the ridge on the outside. Now finish up by heavily lubricating the inside of the seal. This is where the seal comes in contact with the inside of the rear shell bearing, and it has to turn freely. Finally, slide the drive shaft into the hole at the back of the freezing cylinder. Just twist it until it locks into place. Next, the beater assembly goes in. That's the big part with the curved shape and the two blades. Take one of the blades, either one, and take a good look at the sharp edge to make sure it's not nicked or too worn down. It should be no less than 15/16 of an inch thick. If you think something's wrong with the blade, show it to your manager. Otherwise, fit the two holes in the blade over the two pins at the slotted end of the beater. The blade only fits on one way, with the sharp edge out. Some machines have metal blades and some have plastic. It doesn't matter which type you have, you handle them the same way. Slide the beater assembly about halfway into the cylinder so the first blade won't fall off while you put the second blade on. Check the other blade for wear, just like the first, and fit it onto the two pins at the open end of the beater. Then slide the beater the rest of the way in. If your machine is model 481, the beater assembly has 3 blades, not 2, due to the model's larger freezing cylinders. Now, the freezer door. It goes over the front of the freezing cylinder. It's the big white part, along with the gasket, the bearing, the prime plug, and its O-rings. First, look at the freezer door gasket to be sure it isn't cut or broken. If it's okay, the gasket fits on the back of the freezer door, and then the bearing fits over the hub on the door. Don't lubricate the gasket or the bearing, and make sure the bearing's flange is against the door. Now, put the O-rings on the prime plug. An O-ring goes in each of the grooves. Check both O-rings for nicks or cuts, then slide them into the grooves. Now, lubricate both O-rings and the prime plug shaft. The lubrication makes the O-rings swell up a little, so they form a good tight seal. When that's done, push the prime plug down into the top of the freezer door. The door fits over the 4 studs on the front of the freezing cylinder, and it's held in place by 4 hand screws. Put the screws on in a crisscross pattern. First this screw, then this one, then over here, and the last one. And then go back and tighten them down the same way. That's the best way to get the door on tight and even. Just get the hand screws nice and snug. Never use force to tighten them. Next, you have to lubricate the inside of the spouts in the freezer door, top and bottom, as far in as you can reach with your finger. Now, assemble the draw valves for each spout and install them in the door. There are 2 draw valves for each door and 3 O-rings that go on each valve. Don't forget to check each O-ring for any damage, and then slide the O-rings into the slots on the valve. Then, get some Petrogel on your finger and lubricate all 3 O-rings. Put the valves into the door from the bottom, so the slot in the valve comes out the top of the door and looks like this. The next step in this part of the job is installing the spinner blades. 1 spinner blade goes into each draw valve. Lubricate the spinner blade shaft with Petrogel, but be sure not to lubricate past the notch. Then, insert the spinner blade shaft into the draw valve from the bottom. Lift the slip collar up and push the spinner blade shaft into the fitting until it locks. You might have to give it a twist. Then release the slip collar. The spinner blade should be flush with the bottom of the draw spout. Now, the 2 draw handles and the pivot pin that holds them in place. Make sure the colored dot on the handle matches the colored dot on the panel above the freezer door. The pivot pin slips in and holds the whole thing together. Then take the restrictor caps from the parts tray and snap one over each draw spout. And that's it for the freezer door. Remember, the other freezing cylinder and freezer door are assembled and installed the same way. You can review the instructions at any time simply by replaying this part of the tape. In fact, if you have any questions about what you've just seen, you should rewind the tape and replay it up to this point now. I know it seems like a lot of complicated procedures, but I'm sure after you've done it a couple of times, it'll become second nature. Okay, let's go ahead to the remaining setup procedures. The back of the machine is where the shake mix goes. You must also install a mix probe that measures the mix level. All these steps are on the flip chart too, and all the parts are in the 3rd and last parts tray. Let's watch as Bob assembles and installs the 2nd air mix pump. The first one is already in place. The large metal part is called the pump cylinder. The 2 white plastic parts are the liquid valve body with the flange on the bottom and the piston with the hole in it on the top. You need to add some parts to the liquid valve body and the piston, and then put them both inside the pump cylinder. Start with the piston. The piston needs an O-ring installed, and as before, check the O-ring. If it's okay, slip it over the end of the piston and into the groove. Now, in the wide groove, you need to install a bigger ring called a check band. Take a close look at the check band. One side is flat, and the other side is curved. The curved side has to go on the inside, and the flat side has to go on the outside. Then, just slip it over the end of the piston into the groove. The check band and the O-ring should not be lubricated. Now, in the hole on the top end of the piston, you need to put a metal part called an air orifice. It's very important to make sure you're using the right orifice because that's what controls how much air is mixed with the shake mix. The top should be round, and the number stamped on it should be A120. You need to look through the little hole to make sure it's not blocked. And then slip the tiny O-ring onto the end. And don't lubricate this O-ring either. Then, fit the air orifice into the hole on the top of the piston and place it aside while you put the liquid valve body together. The liquid valve body takes 2 O-rings in these 2 grooves and 2 check bands in these 2 wide grooves. Look carefully at the O-rings and bands to make sure they're not damaged. And also, make sure the check bands are flat side out and curved side in. Then slip them all in place. The last O-ring is easier to install if you put it over the other end. Now, set it down and lubricate the inside of the pump cylinder. Put some Petrogel on your finger and lubricate as far into the bottom of the pump cylinder as you can reach. Try to spread the Petrogel as evenly as possible. Now, push the piston up inside the pump cylinder from the bottom. The bottom is the end with the threaded fitting on it. Push it all the way through until the hole in the piston is showing through the larger hole in the pump cylinder. And then, align the small steel button on the liquid valve body with the notch in the pump cylinder. And slide the valve body all the way in so the flange end is at the bottom against the pump cylinder. Some machines have the new coaxial pump instead of the pump you've just seen assembled. It has O-rings and check bands which are installed the same way, but does not have an air orifice. It fits into the pump cylinder the same way too. Now, set the pump cylinder down for a minute and put together the mix inlet fitting. It's going to go on the bottom of the liquid valve body. It's an L-shaped part. It has barbs on one end and a groove for an O-ring on the other end. Check the O-ring for cuts or nicks, then slip it over the end of the fitting and into the groove. Then, thoroughly lubricate the fitting with Petrogel. Now, assemble the spring in the poppet and snap it into place on the end of the fitting. The spring and the poppet act as a pressure relief valve to keep pressure from building up in the freezing cylinder, so it's important to get this part installed right. The fitting goes into the bottom of the liquid valve body, and then the keeper pin slides through the cross holes at the bottom of the pump cylinder all the way through to hold everything together. Now, there are 2 clear plastic hoses that fit on the cylinder. One is called the suction line. It has a weight on one end, and the clear plastic end slips onto the mix inlet fitting. The other hose with the white plastic nuts on the ends is called the flare line, and it goes on the threaded fitting. First though, push back the nuts and lubricate both ends lightly all around the flare. That way, when you tighten the nuts, they won't twist or break the tubing. Then, just screw one end, either end, of the flare line onto the threaded fitting on the pump cylinder. Now, put the collar over the pump cylinder, making sure the cross holes in the collar are at the top. You'll be putting a keeper pin through those holes. That'll hold the cylinder inside the back mix cabinet. This knob is called a ball crank, and it's what connects the machine's pump motor to the air mix pump. It fits into the drive hole in the side of the piston. This takes a little doing sometimes. You might have to jiggle it around until it fits. The piston fits over the ball crank, with the ball crank in the drive hole. And then the pump collar slides up into the grooves on the faceplate of the machine. And then the keeper pin goes through the cross holes in the collar to hold the pump on. It's really important to get the pump installed right. If it's not, it could damage the machine. Remember, during your normal opening procedures at your store, Both pumps are assembled and installed at the same time. You can review the instructions for assembling and installing the air mix pump at any time by simply replaying this part of the tape. In fact, if you have any questions about the instructions you've just seen, you should review them now, before you go ahead to the remaining setup steps which follow. The next step we'll discuss explains how to sanitize the machine, hook up the lines for mix and syrup, and calibrate the system. First of all, go around to the side of the machine and open the access door. Install the rear drip tray beneath the rear shell bearing and turn the left and right disconnect switches on. Then, flip the mix storage switch, either to the right or the left, so it points to one of the disconnect switches. It can't be in the middle. Then close the access door. Now, you need to mix some sanitizer solution to use for sanitizing the machine. But first, remember to wash your hands thoroughly with McDonald's antimicrobial hand wash. Then, at the back sink, mix a pail of sanitizing solution using 1 packet of McDonald's sanitizer and 2.5 gallons of lukewarm water. Use your hands to mix the sanitizing solution as the pail fills with water. Fill it up to about here and bring the sanitizer back to the machine. Put the pail of sanitizer inside the mix cabinet. Brush clean the mix feed tube with the sanitizing solution using the long 48-inch brush. Then, connect the other end of the flare line to the mix feed tube. Put the heavy end of the suction line into the pail of sanitizing solution, and then go around to the front of the machine. Here, you're going to need an empty pail. Put it under the draw spouts. Pull the prime plug up and push the button labeled wash. That pumps the sanitizing solution from the pail that's in the mix compartment up into the freezing cylinder. Pretty soon, the solution starts coming out of the bleed port at the bottom of the freezer door. When it's flowing steadily, pull the draw handles one at a time to draw off all the sanitizing solution. Normally, the sanitizer is pumped through the cylinder during the timed wash cycle. If you need to cancel the cycle, turn the control switch to beater and then to off. When all the solution's been drained, just close the draw handles by pushing them up. When you do that, any sanitizer left in the suction and flare lines might run back into the pail in the mix compartment. So make sure you wait for the lines to drain before you take the pail out. The procedures you've just seen for sanitizing the shake machine are a very important health precaution. If you have any questions about these instructions, replay this part of the tape now. The next step is to put the mix in the machine and prime it. Wash your hands again thoroughly with antimicrobial hand wash. Then, at the back sink, mix another batch of sanitizing solution, 1 packet in 2.5 gallons of water, in the mix reservoir, and sanitize the reservoir cover, the mix probe, and the mix funnel. Then, take all those things back to the machine. Put the mix reservoir and the mix reservoir cover into the mix cabinet, and put the weighted end of the suction line into the reservoir. Plug the mix probe into the back of the machine so the probe hangs down into the mix reservoir, and then install the mix funnel. The mix probe monitors the mix level so the machine doesn't run out. So it's important to get the mix probe installed right. Now, your store may have a mix probe that looks like this, but it works exactly the same way. Okay, now you need to fill the reservoir with fresh mix. As always, when taking mix from the walk-in cooler, use the first in, first out method. The mix bag fits into the tote pour basket. You just take the cap off and lift the whole thing up to pour it. Here's how you can be sure to get all the mix out of the bag. Put the top back on and turn the bag upside down. This allows the remaining mix to drain down to the mouth of the bag. It's important to do this, Otherwise, we'd waste a lot of mix by throwing away bags that aren't empty. Then you can hold the bag over the mix reservoir again, take the cap off, and squeeze the remaining mix out of the bag. Once you have the mix in the reservoir, push the funnel forward and close the mix cabinet door. Now, back at the front of the machine, place an empty pail beneath the draw spouts. Make sure the prime plug is in the up position. Then pull the draw handles forward and push the button marked prime. Keep holding it in. This procedure ensures that all the sanitizing solution is flushed out of the freezing cylinder. Then, keep holding the prime button in until you see full-strength mix coming out of the spouts. Then push the draw handles back up and wait until the mix comes out of the bleed port steadily. When it does, release the prime button and wait until the mix stops flowing from the bleed port. Then push the prime plug down. Then, rinse the prime plug area with clean water, throw away the mix with sanitizer in it, and put the control switch to auto. You need to have the machine assembled 3 or 4 hours before lunch so it has time to freeze down properly before we start serving shakes. Waiting that long allows ice crystals to grow so the milkshake has a good icy bite, one thing that makes McDonald's shakes taste so great. The other freezing cylinder must be primed in exactly the same way you've just seen illustrated. And since you've used mix to prime the machine, you'll need to add more mix to the reservoir to operate the machine properly. Also, depending on where your store is located, local health departments may require use of a mix storage cover, so check with your manager. If you have any questions about the procedures for filling the reservoir or priming the shake machine, now would be a good time to rewind the tape and review these steps. Now, the next step is to check the calibration of the system. You'll need a calibration cup and the syrup sampler. When you put the sampler over the end of the syrup line fitting and squeeze it, it will draw syrup through the line. Now, what you're going to do is push the sampler for exactly 5 seconds. And if the system is calibrated right, you should get 1 ounce of syrup in the small cylinder of the calibration cup. This has to be done accurately, so you must use a stopwatch to time it. You can get the stopwatch from your manager. Remember, 5 seconds isn't much time, so you have to watch it closely. Okay, push the sampler for 5 seconds, and then check to see if you have exactly 1 ounce. If you do get the wrong amount, you have to adjust the pressure at the back of the machine. These are the pressure regulators. To adjust one, first loosen the lock nut. And if you're not getting enough syrup through the system, turn the regulator screw to the right. That increases the air pressure. If you're getting too much syrup, you need to reduce the air pressure. But first, remove the air supply line to release the pressure that's already in the tank. Then decrease the regulator pressure by turning the regulator screw to the left. And reconnect the air line. Then, go around to the front of the machine and check the calibration again. Calibrating the syrup system is important because if there's too much or too little syrup in a shake, it won't taste the way it's supposed to. And that means our customers won't get the best products they deserve. One other thing, once you've changed the pressure regulator, don't forget to go back and tighten the lock nut again so it won't slip out of adjustment. Each syrup line must be calibrated at the beginning of every day, the way you've just seen it done. If you have any questions about the procedures for calibrating syrup lines, rewind the tape now and watch this portion again. Okay, once the syrup system is calibrated, we can connect the syrup lines. Make sure you connect the proper syrup line to its corresponding syrup inlet fitting. Insert the line properly by pushing it in and giving it a twist to lock it. When all the syrup lines have been connected, you can install the front cover, the drip tray, and the splash shield. Also, be sure the cup dispenser and the cup lid holder are filled. Finally, Prime the syrup lines by drawing a small amount of shake from each spout and throw it away. Well, that's how to set the shake machine up at the beginning of the day. Remember, it has to be done 3 or 4 hours before lunch, so it has time to properly freeze down before we start serving shakes. You've now seen all the instructions for setting up the Model 480 and 481 Taylor shake machines. You can review these instructions at any time by simply replaying the portion of this tape with the red bar at the bottom of the screen. When you're setting the shake machine up, be sure you have the flip chart handy to remind you of the proper steps and procedures. If you have any further questions about how to set up the machine, please ask your manager for help.